This year is a very special year. It's a very special year for the Bayit, and it's a very special year for us here in the Kollel. You know, obviously, the Rosh doesn't need much introduction here, but still, just say a few words. We minhag is to make a marba a little bit pasimcha, to have a Masiba, and Rabbi says, it's based on the Bach says that even though the Iker din on Chanukah is lohoidos ulahalo, is to sing praise to Hashem, to light the neiros spiritually. On Purim, we make a mishta v'simcha. We make a party with wine, physically. So we know the famous Bach that Purim was a physical war to destroy the physical, the gufim and mainam, to totally destroy the Jewish nation. So when we won, we make a physical feast as a simcha. But in Chanukah, it was a spiritual war. They were very happy to let us live, subservient to their ideals. So when we were victorious, we do it spiritually. So there's really no Indian to make a Suda. But the Ramah says that there was something else that happened on Chanukah also. Besides the spiritual victory, we also had a chanuka sabayis. And the chanuka sabayis, chanuka samizbeach, they rededicated the Beis HaMikdash, the Mizbeach, and therefore there's a minhag to laharvis ktsas v'simcha, and that's why we make a Masiba Chanukah. So we had here a chanuka sabayis. Chanuka sabayit. We had a chanuka sabayit. We rededicated the bayit with a new ner, which, like the ner Chazal say, a ner is a shemen and a psila. The psila is the wick, and the shemen goes and is drawn up. Mashcheni acharecha narutza. We're drawn up through the wick. Klal Yisrael is compared to the shemen zayis. The eish is the Scheiner, and the psila is the Talmidei Chachamim. So we were zeicha to have a new light, a new Moed Asra, to reignite the spirit which created tremendous excitement, which is still there, vibrant in the community and in the Kollel as well. And we're very grateful for the Rav to making his come all the way from LA, come here to the cold Toronto, but to warm it up a little bit with his ner. And we're very honored to have him here and to lead us and speak at our Chanukah Masiba.
I just wanted to say what an honor it is to be able to have such a Makam Torah with such a high caliber of Talmidei Chachamim here in our very Kehillah, here not only in our Kehillah, but here in our building, to be able to come any time of the day and to really take advantage of tremendous Talmidei Chachamim that we're all of us, including myself, are taking for granted that they're here. And it's a tremendous gift to have not only Talmidei Chachamim, who are Osek b'Torah, Torasam Umnasam, and really are the highest caliber that we can find in the world today, but also really fine individuals, people who every time you walk into this kollel, they're makabel you b'sever panim yafos, with a smile, with a tremendous warmth, and it's just a tremendous pleasure. I have to say personally that one of the biggest perks of this job is that every day when I walk to my office, I hear a kol Torah wafting through the building and echoing through the halls. It's a tremendous nachas ruach, and it gives me a tremendous chizuk. And I have so a personal hakaras hatov to the younger light, to the Kollel. Rabbi Weinberg, thank you so much for inviting me to speak, and to all the other avrechim, chizku ve'imtzu, and your work is tremendous, and you're really being mechazek so many people that are here, whether they acknowledge it all the time or not. It's a tremendous chizuk for our community. So here was the setup. So Rabbi Scheiner says there's a new Ner in town. What did I want to talk about? I want to talk about something known as the Ner Ma'aravi, the western light that was in the temple. There's a Gemara that talks about the western light that was in the temple. And this is really what's bothering me, because the reason why there's a good setup, because I come from the West Coast. So if we're going to talk about the Ner Ma'aravi, it's very appropriate that I talk about, I'm the West Coast rabbi, so it's very interesting. When you look at the history of the temple era, especially the Second Temple era, you note that Chanukah is considered to be a tremendously high point in the history of the Jewish people. And it has all to do with the menorah and a miracle that happens with the menorah. But let's think for a second how the Gemara describes how the menorah used to burn during the Second Temple period. The Gemara says something quite fascinating. You know, the Torah calls the inside of the Beis HaMikdash, the covered part, which is the Heichal, it calls it the Edus. It calls it the place of testimony. And therefore, when there's a paroches, there's a special curtain, a dividing curtain inside the covered portion of the Beis HaMikdash. It's called the paroches ha'edus. It's called the curtain of edus, of testimony. The Gemara in Shabbos asks, "My edus, what testimony is taking place in the Beis HaMikdash?" Answers the Gemara, "Amarav zu ner ma'aravi shenosin ba shemen kemidas chavroseha." This refers to the western candle, or the western light of the menorah. It's a machlokas exactly what the western light was. The menorah was positioned in such a way that one of the candles, or one of the lights that was closer to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, was known as the Ner Ma'aravi. And this light produced a miracle on a daily basis, and it was a testimony that God's divine presence, the Scheiner, was still among the Jewish people. Umimena hayamadlik uba hayamisayim. That this was the candle that the Kohen lit first, and it was the candle that the Kohen finished with. So what does this mean? Rashi and Tosfos in the Gemara over there both explain that what it means is that a miracle happened on a daily basis with the menorah in Bayesheni. And that is that even though the Kohen would only put enough oil in every single cup of the menorah to allow the menorah to burn through the night, and the Gemara even discusses that on long winter nights like tonight, you'd have to put in a larger amount of oil because it had to burn longer until the morning. And on shorter summer nights, you put in a little bit less oil because it didn't have to burn as long. But no matter how much oil he put into each cup, it was always of equal amounts. The miracle was that while each one of the candles burned down so that by morning the candles were no longer burning, the Ner Ma'aravi was the exception. There was a special miracle that the Ner Ma'aravi miraculously continued burning throughout the day, such that you didn't have to reignite the Ner Ma'aravi. The Ner Ma'aravi was what we call the Ner Tamid. It was an eternal light. One of the reasons why we have a Ner Tamid over the Ark is to remind us of the Ner Ma'aravi, the Ner Tamid, that was burning in the Beis HaMikdash 24 hours a day, 24/7, and that it only needed to be refilled, but it kept burning. Even though there was only enough oil for it to burn 12 hours, it burnt a full 24 hours on a daily basis. This was bothering me. What's bothering me is that here we are, and we're celebrating a miracle of oil burning for 8 days until we can remanufacture Shemen Zayazach after the tremendous war between the Chashmonoim and the Yavanim. So it's, such a big miracle. 8 days the oil is burning miraculously. But think about it for a second. For every single day, 365 days out of the year when the Beis HaMikdash, before the Yavanim defiled it, there was a daily miracle of the oil burning miraculously every single day. So what's the big deal? That's the question that I have. What's the big deal? If there was on a constant basis, the Ner Ma'aravi was burning miraculously longer than it was supposed to, so what's the big deal? So fine, another 8 days. It's what was going on all the time. So here's where we need a certain historical perspective. The Gemara in Yoma says, the Gemara in Yoma Daf Lamed Tes says that the Ner Ma'aravi continued burning miraculously in this fashion only up till a certain point historically in the middle of Bayesheni. It stopped burning upon the death of Shimon HaTzadik. And the Gemara explains that with the death of Shimon HaTzadik, a number of miraculous things stopped happening. So a person might be able to answer, okay, so Shimon HaTzadik is an ancient temple figure, and the miracle of Chanukah takes place many, many years later, so that's the miracle celebrating that the Chazra Atara Lioshna, that the crown was restored to its original stature, and there was another miracle that happened. But that also is a little bit troublesome, because when you think about the dates, and you think about the chronology, Shimon HaTzadik did not live that much before the era of the Chashmonaim. We know that Shimon HaTzadik lived in an incredibly long time. He was the standout Kohen Gadol of Bayesheni. He was the great tzaddik of Bayesheni, the Kohen Gadol that was the most prominent, that lived the longest, that had the longest reign. And we know from various stories in Chazal that he lived up until meeting Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was the progenitor and the founder of the Greek Empire. And it only broke up into 3 different parts upon his death. So it was only a generation after Alexander the Great, who died at a relatively young age, that you have Antiochus rising to power. So we're dealing with really the difference of even one generation between Shimon HaTzadik and the miracle of Chanukah. So if up until the times of Shimon HaTzadik there was a miracle happening on a daily basis, is it such a big deal that the next generation, that there's such a miracle and everyone can't believe it and it's an amazing thing, we have to make a celebration and a whole yontif over this miracle? It seems, and we have to have an eternal commemoration of this, to have a menorah and have a chanuka in every Jew's house for all of eternity, Abiyas HaGoel. So I'd like to suggest 2 possible answers to this problem that's bothering me. If it's not bothering you, great. The problem that's bothering me, I think I've been able to come up with 2 possible answers. The first answer is that you see from here how much of a difference one generation makes. We have to appreciate the fact that with the death of Shimon HaTzadik, it was the death of an entire era. It was almost like saying that with the death of Shimon HaTzadik, there was a siluk shechina, the removal of the shechina. All of the Gedolei Yisrael perished on that day, and the Jewish people felt like they were truly yitomim, they were truly orphans. And there was a tremendous sense of demoralization, that this is the end, we're never going to, chaval al da'abdin v'lo mishtachin, we're never going to get it back. And the Jewish people's attitude was extremely low, and all of a sudden a miracle comes along, and we're able to recapture and regain a semblance of what we used to have when Shimon HaTzadik was alive. You know, we take it for granted that our children will grow up to be, hopefully, with the same level of frumkeit as us. And you want to know something? We shouldn't take it for granted. If anything, most of us are probably thinking, I want my child to be more learned than I am. I came to learning, let's say, later in life. Or I got my inspiration and there were certain weaknesses that I had, and I want my son or my daughter to be completely enveloped in frumkeit and in Torah, and so that they'll have even more opportunities. They'll even be stronger in their Yiddishkeit than I. And the truth of the matter is that tafasta meruba lo tafasta. Sometimes if you try to grab too much, it ends up backfiring on you. Because we have to appreciate the fact that if we can just get our children to cling to the way of life and our love of Torah that we have, and we can succeed in instilling that to them, that's truly a miracle. Because with every ensuing generation, it's becoming more and more difficult for not only our children, but for our adults as well, to feel that sense of miraculousness about Yiddishkeit, to feel that sense of inspiration about being a Torah Jew. And I think that's one of the miracles of Chanukah, is that we were able to, in a generation that was after Shimon HaTzadik, after all of the glory days were over, and after the great bright light of Shimon HaTzadik had already faded, we were able to recapture it and have even just a semblance for just 8 days of what it was like to be when Shimon HaTzadik was alive. That in itself is a miracle. That in itself is a cause for celebration. So I think that's an important lesson in and of itself, that Chanukah represents returning the crown to its original glory. And when we think about chanuka, chinuch, about educating our children, we should be thrilled and over the moon if we succeed in just making sure that our children are from and love Torah and love learning the way we do, then we're way ahead of the game. And if they go and surpass us, that's really hitting the jackpot. That's icing on the cake. Icing on the cake. But remember not to be overly, not to overly pressurize our children, because we have to realize the nature of the way the world runs. So that's the first explanation that I was going to suggest. The second answer, and with this I'll conclude, is that there's a Mishnah in Yoma which itemizes other things that changed with the death of Shimon HaTzadik. And Tosfos observes that the Kohanim, when they used to bless the people, when Shimon HaTzadik was alive, they used to make all brachas in the Beis HaMikdash with the Shem HaMeforash, with the divine, ineffable four-letter name. And with the death of Shimon HaTzadik, they stopped. And Tosfos in Sota says that the reason why they stopped was because once the Shekhinah departed, it was considered to be disrespectful to mention the divine name without the Shekhinah being right there in their presence. So the Gemara acknowledges that not only was Shimon HaTzadik the end of an era, but he was the end of the divine presence being part of Klal Yisrael. And the miracle of Chanukah, therefore, is that even after the Shekhinah is no longer with us, we're still zoicha to a nes galoi. We're still zoicha to an overt miracle. And that in itself is a big thing. It's one thing to have a miracle when the Shekhinah is right here with you. But what about when you're feeling very, very distant from the Shekhinah? What about when the Shekhinah has already departed from your midst? Can you still have a miracle? That's what the story of Chanukah is. It's amidst the darkness, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can make miracles for every single person. And for the nation of Israel, even after the Shekhinah is gone. It's an inspirational story for the Jewish people in Golus. The story of Chanukah, some Meforshim want to understand that the story of Chanukah is an inspirational prelude to a messianic age. I don't think so. I think the story of Chanukah is an inspirational story for the pre-messianic age. That even when we're in Golus, we can be zochet to great things. Even when the Shekhinah is not here, we can be zochet to great things. We just have to want it enough, and we have to work hard enough for it. So we have to look for those nisim within Golus itself, and celebrate the nisim that can happen to us every single day, even today. We should be zochet to see nisim in our remaining years of darkness, until the lights of the Ner Ma'aravi will once again burn daily, 24 hours a day. Should happen b'mehera b'yameinu. Amen.